My name is Margery Cuyler, and I have the best job in the whole world because I write stories about witches and ghosts, goblins and ghouls and spiders and skeletons. You might wonder, how I got into this business writing about those scary creatures. Well, I used to live in a haunted house. It was more than 300 years old, and a famous battle was fought near the house, and a soldier in the battle received a chest wound, and then he crawled to the house and he died. And after that, every year, near the anniversary of the battle, he'd show up in the house. I can't say I ever saw him, but he did inspire a chapter book I wrote called The Battlefield Ghost for ages 7 to 10. But I'm not going to read this book today. I'm going to read two stories that are about a skeleton, a different skeleton in each story, and both were illustrated by Will Terry. So Will, I'm going to introduce you right now. And I see you're wearing a cape, I think because you're getting ready for Halloween, but you really need a pair of crazy glasses. So I'm going to send you my glasses, and then maybe you can tell us a little bit about how you got into illustrating children's books. So here goes. Are you ready?
Okay, give me your glasses. Awesome. Well, my name is Will Terry, and I think I have the best job in the world.
No, you don't. I have the best job.
No, I have the best job.
All right, so we both have the best job. We love children's books.
We do. And I get to draw pictures of lions and dragons, skeletons and pirates and snakes. And I do it all for children's books, some of which you may even have in your library or in your bookstore or even at your home. You know, when I was a kid, I struggled with reading. And I used to look at the pictures to help me understand the story. But now I love to read. I've fallen in love with reading. I learned to read, and I learned to read because my mom read to me, and I learned to read to myself. And now I love making the pictures that help you guys understand the story. So it's kind of funny how that turned about. Today, I'm going to teach you how to draw some spooky characters from some of the books that Margery and I have created together. And I think skeletons might be a great place to start. What do you think, Margery?
All right, I think it's time for a story. So I'm going to put on my skeleton glasses. And the first story I'm going to read to you is called Skeleton for Dinner. So you can see there's a skeleton right on the cover. There he is again. And we'll get started.
Okay.
Oh, also, see the witches in the background? They have cool things on their hats. So as I read the story, be sure to watch their hats and you can see what Will added to make them more interesting. Skeleton for dinner. Okay, there's my name. There's Will's name. Here we go. One day, Big Witch and Little Witch decided to brew a stew. They added all their favorite ingredients: shark fins and snake skins, spider silk and centaur's milk, catfish whiskers and banshee blisters. And look, if you look at the art, you can see they're about to add a snake because witches like really yucky stuff in their stews. Big Witch took a taste. "This is so yummy," she said. "Let's invite our friends for dinner." "What fun," said Little Witch. "I'll make a list. Ghost, ghoul, and skeleton," boomed Big Witch. "We must have skeleton for dinner." Just then, Skeleton was clickety-clacking up the hill. And you can see in the art that Little Witch is putting the list of guests they want to invite for dinner right up on the tree. As he reached the top, he saw Little Witch's list pegged to a tree. He heard what Big Witch said to Little Witch. I think they want to have me for dinner. I don't want to be eaten. His bones began to quake and shake. Now I'm stopping here for a minute because it's really important to understand that when the witches want to have Skeleton for dinner, it could mean two different things. It could mean that they want to invite him as a guest, or it could mean they want to eat him for dinner. And of course, Skeleton thinks that they want to eat him for dinner, and that's why his bones are quaking and shaking. Before the witches saw him, he rat-a-bat-tatted down the hill and jingled-jangled as fast as he could to Ghosts. And if you look carefully, you can see that Ghost is a little girl. The witches want me in their stew, and they want to eat you too, he screeched. Oh no, wailed Ghost, and she floated behind him. They scooted by the graveyard where Ghoul was shoveling dirt. Where are you going in such a hurry? He asked. The witches want us in their stew, and they want to eat you too, said Skeleton. Yikes, shouted Ghoul. Let's go hide. And he dashed after the others. Back on the hill, Little Witch said, I'm off to invite our friends for dinner. And away she flew on her broomstick. But when she got to Skeleton's, he was nowhere to be seen. Maybe he's a ghost, thought Little Witch. But she didn't see anyone at Ghost's house either. I bet they're at Ghoul's, thought Little Witch. She zoomed to the graveyard. It was as quiet as the moon. Where is everybody? Said Little Witch. How can I invite our friends for dinner if they've all disappeared? She flew back to the top of the hill. I couldn't find anybody at home, she told Big Witch. I guess we'll have to eat our dinner, our stew, all by ourselves. And I was really looking forward to our party. She took down the sign and began to cry. Crow flew down and picked it up. I think I know what's wrong, he cawed, and off he flew, flapping his wings. He went to Skeleton's. No skeleton. He went to Ghost's. No ghost. He went to Ghoul's. No ghoul. And then he saw footprints leading into the woods. He followed them to a big tree. Up, up, up he flew. What are you doing here? Asked Skeleton. I came to tell you that The witches want you to come for dinner. You mean they want to eat us for dinner, said Skeleton. No, they want to have you for dinner, said Crow. That means invite you for dinner. Oh, said Skeleton. Well, that's different from what I thought. I'm hungry, let's go. So Skeleton, Ghost, and Ghoul came down from the tree. They picked some poison ivy to take to the witches for their stew. Don't forget, the witches like really yucky stuff in their stew. So poison ivy is a perfect house present to take to the witches. When they got to the top of the hill, the witches were so happy to see them, their faces lit up like jack-o'-lanterns. Come and eat, said Big Witch. Have a seat, said Little Witch. And we'll give you a treat, said both witches. It looks so yummy, said Skeleton, that I wish I had a tummy. And they all had fun eating the witch's stew together. And that's the end of the story. Well, I think we'd all like to find out how you drew the skeleton for dinner.
I would love to, but I can't draw unless I have those glasses that you have. Those are some good ones.
Okay, here they come, the skeleton glasses for Will.
All right. Wow, thank you. All right. Well, skeletons have feelings too, you guys. And I want to show you how I draw emotions on my characters in the books that I illustrate. So here we have Skeleton for dinner, and I've taken him out of the picture and I've blown him up, and then I made a whole bunch of little skeletons and I took the eyeballs out. So you might be seeing that the eyeballs are missing. That's because I'm going to draw them back in. I'm going to show you how I draw the emotions back in. So I'm going to draw the emotion of sad and happy and angry and scared and excited and sleepy and thinking and sneaky. So here we go. The first one that I'm going to draw here is sad. Now, when you're sad, what everyone knows what happens is you make a sad face. That's right. Your little mouth goes down like that. That's sad. Now, what do your eyes do? Well, usually when we're sad, we kind of go, oh, and we look down. So I'm going to give him eyeballs that are looking down. And sometimes illustrators mess up and we draw the eyeball too low. So I can fix that. Okay, the next one is happy. Now, what happens when we're happy? Look at Margery. She's happy. And it's the opposite. Our mouth goes up, obviously, right? In fact, we might even have an open mouth a little bit more. And our eyes, because our cheeks, when we're happy and we smile, our cheeks push up into our eyes, and it makes our eyes kind of do this, where we're kind of actually squinty because we're so happy. Maybe we're giggling. Look at Margery's eyes. They go a little squinty. Okay, now if we're angry, that's when our eyebrows, maybe we're angry and we grit our teeth. So sometimes I like to draw angry with like gritted teeth, and that I'm not sure I like that one as much. So I'm going to do that again, maybe like that, like a mouth like that. And then eyebrows. I don't know if I'm going to take my glasses off. Eyebrows go down, angry. So now I'm going to draw the eyebrows on kind of like this. Let me get these skeleton glasses and my regular glasses back on. And we might be angry at something. And so I'm going to have the eyeballs looking off to the side, angry. Okay. Now, scared, what happens when we're scared? Sometimes when we're scared, our mouth gets tiny. We're scared. And our eyebrows might be back like this, but our eyeballs get really tiny because our eyes get bigger. We're scared. And so we show more whites of our eyes. So smaller pupils in the eyes. Okay, excited. What is excited? Excited might look like this. We might have a smile, and we also might have little eyes. So sometimes we get the same things, and then like that, or excited you can draw these emotions in different ways sometimes. Another way to do it is excited is wow, and kind of turn that wow into a smile. I'm excited. Something good's going to happen, Margery. We're going to be on KidLit TV. And then the next one is sleepy. What happens when we're sleepy? Well, our eyebrows kind of go down, maybe like this. And maybe our mouth is just kind of, it's kind of like a nothing mouth. And maybe our eyes start to close. So instead of seeing the eyeballs, we just kind of get our eyes kind of closing. So that's sleepy. And then thinking, we might be, sometimes when people think, they stick their tongue out and they go, and they look up. Sometimes they look up like they're thinking. And so maybe their tongue kind of comes out of their mouth like that. That could be thinking. And then sneaky. Have you ever tried to sneak something that you're not supposed to get? I'm not saying you should do that, but everyone knows that someone has been sneaky before. And sneaky might have eyebrows that kind of come down. They're not so angry, but they're like, I wonder if I'm going to get caught. So maybe there's a smile combined. Like, I might get away with this. So that's sneaky. Okay. So that's drawing emotions. Now, I want to also draw and show you guys kind of the difference between a new character that I've drawn, a different skeleton, and that's Bonaparte from my new books with Margery. The first one was called Bonaparte Falls Apart. And this one, I just want to compare. I had to draw a different skeleton for each book, and I didn't want them to look the same. And Margery's holding up that book because it's a different skeleton. So the big differences I want to point out is when I was trying to make this skeleton different was the first one was I wanted to give Bonaparte a hat. The skeleton doesn't have a hat. And then I thought, well, the next big thing that I can do is make Bonaparte, his head, much bigger. So if you look right here, this is skeleton for dinner, and his head size takes up about a third of the skeleton, right? But if we look at and do the same thing with Bonaparte, look at that. We've got half of Bonaparte. Half of him is a head. So his head is much bigger. And that makes him look a little bit younger, and it just makes him totally different. And then if you look at his pelvis bone with Bonaparte, I just gave him like a washer, just to, like a washer that goes with a nut. But with Skeleton for Dinner, there's actually, it's a little bit more realistic in that it's got more of this kind of shape to it, more of a pelvis shape. So those were some of the differences, because as illustrators, sometimes, when I drew Skeleton for Dinner, I didn't know that Margery's going to ask me to draw another skeleton book. So I had to make the skeleton different. So
you should read the Bonaparte Falls Apart. We can share that. And then you could talk about how you developed Bonaparte as a character when he's in action. Well,
Let's
here,
do that. Yeah.
I'll tell you a little bit about why I wrote Bonaparte Falls Apart in the first place. I love Halloween. Look, I even have these glasses for Halloween. I love Halloween, and every year I've put a skeleton out in front of our house to greet trick-or-treaters. But one year my skeleton fell apart because the screws came loose. I think there's a picture of him lying on the ground. There it is. And I did put him back together in time for the trick-or-treaters. But before I knew it, I gave him a name, Bonaparte. And then I started writing a story. And so this is the story of Bonaparte in the first book in which he stars. And it's called Bonaparte Falls Apart, because Bonaparte's bones are always coming apart. That's why I named him Bonaparte. So here's the cover, and I'll go ahead and read it, and then I want Will to chime in.
Okay.
So here's where Bonaparte and his friends live, which is kind of cool. They have this kind of strange village where you see teeth in the doorways, and it looks almost like outer space. Okay, stick out your ears, make your eyes really big so you can see all of Will's wonderful art, and we'll begin. Bonaparte was falling to pieces, and this really shook him up, especially when he rode his bike or played catch or visited the doctor's office. And if you look carefully, you can see that his bones are actually falling apart. His leg bone, then when he's trying to catch a baseball, he loses part of his arm. And then when he's at the doctor's, he loses part of his leg bones. And sometimes his bones rolled away, and it took him forever to find them. And here, his head, his skull, is actually rolled under the bed. And we just hope that he doesn't reach for that basketball and think it's his head. Just kind of the same shape as his skull. What will happen when school starts? Bonaparte asked his friends as his hand clacked to the sidewalk. And you can see he's got a friend who looks like Frankenstein. He has a friend who looks like a mummy. And he has a friend that looks like a black widow spider. I'm falling apart. Everyone will make fun of me. I have an idea, said Frankenstein, clicking Bonaparte's hand into place. Let's glue and screw your bones together. So Frankenstein glued and screwed and screwed and glued. But when he was finished, Bonaparte couldn't move. I can't walk, he said. So I think some of that glue got into his joints, right? Because he's totally stiff. Frankenstein had to undo all his hard work. And you can see the Mamicula and Blackie Widow help. I have another idea, said Blackie Widow. I'll spin and pin a web around you. So Blackie Widow spinned and pinned and pinned and spinned. But when she was finished, Bonaparte was all tangled up. I'm a mess, he said. Blackie Widow had to undo all her hard work. I have to say, this is one of my favorite illustrations because of the scissors that she uses to cut apart the web. That was a great idea, Will.
I had so much fun with that one.
I have the best idea of all, said Mamicula. I'll wrap and strap your bones in place. So Mamicula wrapped and strapped and strapped and wrapped. But when he was finished, Bonaparte couldn't see. "Where is everybody?" he asked in a muffled voice. So obviously, you can see Mamicula covered up his eyes when he was trying to strap him together, strap his bones together. Mamicula had to undo all his hard work. Time passed, and Bonaparte was so worried about school that his head fell off. Frankenstein picked it up and set it back in place. "Before school starts, we will bone up on some other ideas," he said. "We will leave no bone unturned," said Blacky Widow. "No bones about it," said Mamicula. But none of the ideas they came up with seemed just right. And you can see in the art that Mamicula is trying to staple Bonaparte together with a staple gun, and Blacky Widow is trying to get his bones to stick together with some clay. And finally, you can see Frankenstein wants to nail all the bones together, but Bonaparte's not too crazy about that idea. Anyway, they try everything until a dog ran by with a bone in his mouth. "That bone lover would be perfect for Bonaparte," said Mamicula. So they ran after the dog and brought him to Bonaparte. What a fetching dog," Bonaparte exclaimed. "You can teach him to retrieve your bones," said Frankenstein. "Bonanza," said Bonaparte. "You are my bona fide friends." He named the dog Mandible, and he spent the next 2 weeks training him. When school started, Bonaparte was still a little worried about what the other kids might think. But Bonaparte was a home running hit at recess. So you can see that when he hits a home run, he loses his arm bone and his hand bones, but Mandible is there to retrieve them and take them back to Bonaparte. Bonaparte was a jaw-dropping sensation at lunch. So even when he's eating and his teeth go flying across the room, there's Mandible ready to catch them and take them back to Bonaparte. And of course, the kids think this is actually very cool. And Bonaparte was a rib-tickling wonder in science class. And you can see that he's standing there with Mandible and probably teaching the kids about the different bones that make up a skeleton. So now the kids are really impressed. Bonaparte could hang loose without anyone making fun of him. And this made him very happy. Clickety clack. And there we see Mandible at the very end with the bone in his mouth, and I presume it's one of Bonaparte's bones. Yeah. That wasn't too scary, was it? Were you scared, Will?
No.
All right, I hope you had fun when you drew the pictures for this book. So let's go back to what you were saying about the difference between the two skeletons. And I think we'd all like to hear more about what goes into drawing a skeleton such as Bonaparte.
Yeah.
So there.
Okay, so I want to draw I want to show some action because we talked about the emotion, and now I want to show you how I would actually give Bonaparte a little bit of action. So I'm going to give you, I've got this picture right here of this little boy, and he's jumping on a trampoline. And then I have Bonaparte right here. And if I were drawing Bonaparte jumping like this little kid, that's what I would do first, is get pictures to draw from. So that's what illustrators do. We call them reference pictures. And sometimes we take those pictures on our own. Sometimes we get them from Google Images. Sometimes we can get them from magazines. We can get them from anywhere. And this little kid is jumping up in the air, and I'm going to make Bonaparte jumping up in the air. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at this little kid, and I'm going to see his spine, and it's going kind of like that, kind of curved. So I'm just going to draw a little curved spine, and then I see his head on top. Now Bonaparte has this huge head. So I'm going to draw the head really big like that. And then once I get the spine, I'm going to put his little pelvis. Now his little pelvis goes right in here. And that's one of the ways that illustrators draw is we kind of draw what we call the torso first, and then we put the arms and the legs on. So now the next thing I can do is I can say, okay, well, he has an arm that comes out here and goes up here, and then he has his hand on there like that. And he's got a couple of fingers, and then this other arm might actually come behind his head because I've drawn his head so big. So maybe it comes over here, and maybe it comes out here. And then he's got another hand on there, a little thumb and some fingers. And I'm just drawing really quick right now. Now, here's where it gets tricky because there's some overlapping, but he has a knee that comes clear up into his chest, maybe right there, and then it comes back across his body, and then a foot that comes down like that. And then his other knee is going to attach over here, and it's going to come more straight out, and it's going to come down, and maybe that foot's going to come down like that. And of course, you can draw the little toes on there. And we're going to do a drawing lesson a little bit later. This is just a little quick drawing that I'm doing right now. And then I could put little details on there. Like I can draw kind of a center line, and I can draw kind of an eye line. And then I can draw his eyeballs and his nose. Bonaparte doesn't really have a nose. He's got kind of a hole. And then if he's jumping on the tramp, he's probably smiling and laughing like this little kid. And he's probably looking at where he's going to land. Now, one of the things that you can do when you show action, it's great to show kids up in the air because that really shows action to be up in the air. But one of the things that I love to do is to draw up other things that would happen. Now, what would happen to Bonaparte's hat if he were jumping on a trampoline? And maybe you're thinking it might fly off because when you jump on a trampoline, sometimes your hat flies off. So I'm going to draw his hat up here, falling off his head because he's just moving so fast that his hat flew off, right? And then the last thing I'm going to do is show maybe where that trampoline is and kind of show like a shadow down here. And so that's how I would draw action with Bonaparte right there. That's how I would draw Bonaparte doing a jump. Now, the next thing I want to do is I want to show you guys how I draw Mandible. And if you've got a piece of paper and a pencil or a pen, you can draw along with me. And this is Mandible from the back of the book because I love this jumping pose that he's doing. So I want to show you guys in 6 easy steps how I draw Bonaparte jumping. Okay, are you guys ready? So I'm going to show the 6 steps right here, and I want you to follow along with me. And now the first thing, I can't stress this enough. I want you guys to draw a little differently than you may be used to. I want you to draw really light. That means hardly touching your pencil to the paper. Okay, we're going to draw really light in the beginning because I'm going to show you how you can make a drawing and you don't need an eraser. Erasers, they mess up the paper and they're unnecessary. And illustrators learn to draw without using an eraser. So this is really important. So step 1, I'm just going to have you on your paper draw kind of an egg shape. Okay, we're going to start off, and you can go over it a bunch of times like I am, but draw really light, super light. And your dog does not have to look like Mandible. This could be your own dog. I'm just showing you how I draw Mandible. If it doesn't look exactly like mine, that's okay. All right. So the first thing, I'm going to draw that egg shape. And then right at the top, I'm just going to lightly put a little line in because his head's flat on the top and we're going to give him a flat head. But rather, we call this, illustrators call this drawing through. We draw the whole object. We don't try to draw part of it. We usually try to draw through and we cut pieces out, and that gives us a better drawing in the end. So that's step one. Now we're going to move on to step two. So in step two, I want you to right about maybe halfway, just make a little indication right about halfway through your egg shape. And then from just below the top right here to here, we're going to draw another egg shape. And it can stick out a little bit too, if it wants to. It can just stick out right about there. Just another little egg shape. Draw light, draw really light. Okay, we're going to keep drawing light. Okay, now the next thing that I want you to do, and I don't have this on step two, but I'm going to do it anyways, kind of a center line that goes through this shape right here, kind of right here. And that's going to give us kind of cut halfway through the muzzle for Mandible. And that's going to allow us to say, okay, well, one eye is going to go over here and the other eye can actually, well, you can draw it through, but we're only going to see part of it because it's on the other side of his head. Okay, it's kind of tucked in there. Okay, so that's step two. All right, are you ready for step three? Okay, here we go, step three. And if you can't keep up on this, guess what? We're recording this. So you might be able to go back and watch the recording and do this again. But step three, we're going to start with the nose. And the nose is going to go on the top of his muzzle. And it's almost the same size and shape as his eyeball. So it's like 3 balls right in a row. Okay. Now this step three is going to be a little tricky because right at the top of his head where it flattens off here, we're going to put an ear, and maybe one ear is kind of floppy like that, you know, so it might be kind of a floppy ear that kind of comes in there because he's jumping up in the air. So his ear is flopping up in the air. And then maybe this other ear on this side, maybe this one's a little more behaved and maybe it's flopping down like that. So a little line there and kind of flopping down. Okay. All right. So now the next thing we're going to do is that's step three. We're going to move to step four now. And on step four, we're going to add arms and legs. Okay. And don't worry about the eyeball. We'll put the eyeball in later. Everyone, and when I draw in schools, they say, "Where he doesn't have any eyeballs yet." We'll get to that. He'll have eyeballs. Okay. So the next step, let's put these little arms in. So the arm comes below this line right here. And we'll just kind of put a little arm and then a little floppy little arm there, because when dogs go up in the air, sometimes their arms flop down a little bit. So maybe it's just kind of flopped like that. And then we're going to put his legs. Now his legs are a little tricky. This leg is going to be bigger and it's going to overlap. And it's just a U shape. Like you could draw a U, like, you know, like I love you. We're just going to draw a U shape right there. And we're going to draw another U shape that kind of is on this side over here, but it's much tinier and it doesn't go through. This one comes on top of, you can see how it's overlapping Bonaparte's body right there. And it's bigger. And that's because it's coming towards you. It's closer to you. Okay. And then we're just going to give him these little feet down here. And these little feet can just be little tiny U's maybe that just kind of flop there. Okay. And that is almost done with step four, sorry. And now we're going to move on to step 5. And step 5 is a little bit tricky, but we're just going to do this. We're just going to make a little line right here, a little smiley line, right? Kind of in the middle part of his muzzle. And we're going to make an upside down, a frowny kind of face right at the bottom like that. Well, that's step 5. And then we're going to put the bone in his mouth. So the bone is actually going to come through. And if you want to just draw, still drawing really light right here, it's just going to go through his mouth. Now there's a lot of lines, they're overlapping. Then at the end out here, we'll just draw kind of a little bone shape, and these bones kind of tuck in like that. So we get like a bone that overlaps there, and then it kind of comes around this way like that. Okay. And then the last thing that we're going to do on step 5 is just put these little tiny little teeth in there so he can hold on to that bone so it doesn't slip out of his mouth. Now, here's what's fun for illustrators, because now we get to draw darker, and we get to ignore the lines that we don't want and pay attention to the lines we do. So one of the lines that we want to ignore is this line right here, the top of that egg shape. I don't want that. So guess what? I'm just going to draw dark right here. We can push down a little more. Now, don't break the lead of your pencil, but I can just say, I want that ear there, and I like this ear here. And if you want to move something, you can move something over at this time. So here's an eyeball here, and then here's the one that tucks behind over here. And then maybe his head comes up right there. And you can go through and you can color in the nose if you want. And we could give him eyeballs now. You could make him looking anywhere you want. You could make him looking up, or you could make him looking down, or you could make him look kind of crazy-eyed. Maybe I'll do that right there. And then we'll finish out that muzzle. And I want this line right here, and I want those teeth. But guess what? I don't want the bone going through his mouth right there. So I'm not going to draw that. I'm going to ignore that one. And now I'm going to draw the bone. And I'm going to ignore it where it comes through over here. And I'm just going to draw that upside down frown and the bottom of his mouth. And then the bone over here. And I know I'm going fast for some of you, but this is just giving you an idea of how illustrators, some illustrators call this part inking. Others call it painting, depending on what they're using, right? And now I want this line here, and I want it to come all the way over, and I want it to stop right there. Because guess what? His leg, his thigh goes in front of his body right there, and then I want to go here. And then I want to draw this little foot and this leg and that little foot right there. And that is Bonaparte. Now you could add eyebrows if you wanted. Some dogs have little dots that you could add there. You could even have maybe a tongue coming up out of his mouth if you want. I don't know if you need that. You could draw some squiggle marks to give him some action at this point. Maybe the bone's twitching a little bit there. And one thing, again, that I really like to draw, and I'm just going to move this whole drawing here up a little bit. And maybe I'll make it just a little bit smaller. To really put things up in the air, you really need to show a shadow underneath. So that's what I'm going to do right here, is just draw a little shadow. And that really puts him up in the air more. So there's the Bonaparte in 6 steps. And that's how I draw him jumping. And I think we're going to move on now. And Margery and I have a new book. And our new book with Mandible and Bonaparte is called Bonaparte Plays Ball. Do you think I should share some of the pictures for that, Margery?
Yeah, I would. I'd share like some of the pictures of the aliens that are in that book. It's a story. It's a baseball story. So there was a lot of new kinds of characters you had to create. You had to create a baseball diamond.
Yeah.
So why don't you share a little bit about that?
Okay.
I'll just say as the writer that Bonaparte is a nervous wreck when his team is going to play his team's called the Little Monsters, and they're going to play a team called the Mighty Aliens in the Weird series. And of course,
the Weird series
is going on right now. So this is a good book to read, actually, to those kids who like baseball and like to watch the World Series.
That's right. And in this story, we get to find out will Bonaparte's bones fall apart while he's playing baseball? I mean, you can imagine if you hit a baseball, it's really hard. That might make Bonaparte's bones fall apart. So here's some of the images that I drew. I loved drawing the aliens. I loved drawing all different types of aliens. And I love drawing them playing this baseball game. And they have huddles and they hit fly balls into the outfield and the aliens try to catch the balls. And Bonaparte is trying to do the best for his team that he possibly can. And towards the end of the book, the mighty or the little monsters are down and they need more runs. And it's Bonaparte's big time to come up to bat to see if he can hit and get some points. And so he strides up, and guess what the aliens do? They're all making fun of him. And they just make fun of him because his bones fall apart, and they're trying to rattle him and trying to get him all scared. Well, he steps up to the plate and hits a smashing ball out into the outfield. And the aliens are freaking out because he gets such a good hit right at the end of the game and runs the bases and becomes the hero of the game. And it's such a fun book. And I had so much fun illustrating this one, Margery. This was it was super fun. And we both are hoping that we get to do a third book in this series.
That would be so much fun for both of us. And Will, we love your artwork. Thank you so much for sharing some of what you do to create these wonderful illustrations.
You're welcome.
So I know that you all have questions. And so I'm going to look at some of your questions, and so is Will. We have these special glasses we wear when we answer questions. So Will, find your glasses and let me look at the Q&A and see what some of you have been asking. And we'll answer your questions as best we can.
Okay. Do you want me to take one first?
Yeah, why don't you go first, and then I see one I can take next.
Okay, here's one. What does mandible mean? And Margery, you wrote the story. Mandible, that's this part of your jaw, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a tooth. And so, of course, it makes sense for a skeleton to name a pet after a tooth.
Right.
So that's mandible's a tooth. And the other question that's kind of relevant is if we were to work on a third Bonaparte, what would it be about? So I've given some thought to this. It could be that Bonaparte gets a new puppy and Mandible doesn't like the puppy. So there's all kinds of problems involved with the new puppy in the house. Another idea would be sort of a Halloween story where Bonaparte discovers that his house is haunted and he wants to find out who the ghost is and why the ghost is haunting his particular house. So I've thought about that. Anyway, it would be so much fun to work on another Bonaparte. So Will, do you see a question?
I do.
About the art?
So here's a good one. How long does it take for an illustrator to illustrate a book? Wow, that's a good question. So to illustrate a book, for some illustrators, it might take them as few as a few months, a month or two. And that's on the really short end. Most books have 32 pages. Some even have 40. Bonaparte has 40 pages. And in any particular book, you're looking at doing maybe 25 to 30 illustrations. And so for me, it takes me about 3 to 4 months to illustrate a book, whereas some people, it might even take them 8 months or even a year to illustrate a book. So it's different for every illustrator, but just know this, when you're flipping through a children's book, you're often flipping through weeks or months of the illustrator's life. And a lot of people are surprised by that because they think that illustrators can, just draw these pictures in a few days or a week or so. And they're always often really surprised when they find out that it usually takes months and months to illustrate a book like this. One illustration sometimes can take me 2 or 3 days to do.
Well, there's a question for me that's kind of like the one you just got, which is how long does it take to write a children's book story? So it varies, but I'd say on average it takes about 6 months because revision is so important. So usually I write out the story in longhand and it just kind of comes out and it has some good ideas maybe, but it's really not in great shape. And so then after that, I type it into the computer as a Word document, and then I start to revise and I revise and I revise and I revise because sometimes the ending's not so good, or sometimes I have too many words and I need to cut, especially to give the illustrator more room to be creative. You know, I don't want to tell the illustrator exactly all the details. I want them to have some freedom to, like with the aliens, to, you know, figure out how you want to draw the aliens. I don't need to give you a lot of instructions in the text or even separate from the text. So I also belong to a writers group, and so I'll share a manuscript with them and they give me some good editorial input. So it's a little bit like when you write your own stories, or you know, you often have to do some revision to try and make them as good as possible. So I'd say it takes about 6 months to write a picture book. And then even after that, I do some revision. Once I see the sketches, sometimes I can take out more words or whatever. Will,
okay, here's a quick one that we can both answer.
Okay.
How many books have you made? And that's by I believe Vianney. And I can answer that for myself. Right around 30 books is how many I've had published. How about you, Margery?
I've had 57 published, wow. But I'm older than you are. So, you know, I started writing right after I graduated from college. And wow. So writing ever since. I wrote a lot of books in the middle of the night because I was raising kids and I had a full-time job. And, you know, you just, if you're a writer, you just find the time to write. And I think that's true if you're an artist. You just make the time, no matter how busy your life is.
Yeah. There was another question here, Margery, that I think goes to both of us. And it was, how long have we known each other or been working together? And I wanted to tell a little quick story in that I have my wife and I raised 3 boys. And one of our favorite books that we ever bought was That's Good, No, That's Bad. Did I get the title right, Margery?
That's Good, That's Bad.
That's Good, That's Bad.
That's
and
good.
We bought that book and we used to read that book to our kids, our boys, at night. Now, this was before I ever met Margery. And I didn't pay attention to the name on the book, the author, because I don't remember names like that. But then when I worked with Margery later on, I think our Skeleton for Dinner came out about 10 or 12 years ago, somewhere around there.
I can't even remember now. I know.
It's like the years go by really fast, but
in 2013, so that's 7 years ago.
7 years. So but we started working on it before that, so it might even be 8 years. But anyway, my wife said, well, that's written by the same book who did That's Good, That's Bad. And I had to run and grab it. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I was starstruck because I was going to get to illustrate a book from an author who I used to read the book. And that was one of my favorite books to read because it was the perfect length and the kids loved it. And so if you haven't seen that book, you need to get that book. That's Good, That's Bad. It's really fun.
It's still in print, believe it or not. Anyway, I think we're just about out of time. I hope that all of you have had fun drawing either skeletons or Mandible the dog or whatever you felt like drawing. You can share your drawings on Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook using the hashtag Bonaparte. And I'll spell that out. It's BONAPARTE. And your parents and teachers, of course, can help you post. And we can't wait to see what you've drawn. That is, to us, the most exciting part of this whole program, is seeing what everybody draws. And I hope you all did. So I think we're finished now, but we look forward to seeing your art. And Will, let's wave goodbye to everybody.
Thanks for letting me draw for you guys today.
And thanks for letting me read. And get ready for Halloween. Yay!